And then Daniel, you and Hank, just let me know about the case.
Yes, Judge. We'll let you know when we hear something.
All right, so they're unsure that the other case, whether or not there's going to be a plea, there's been an issue.
We explained it to you, Jason.
So, all right, the court's going to call 2022 CR 11795, State of Texas versus Angel Gonzales. Could I have parties announced for the record for the state?
Allie Jackson,
Defense?
Kathy Compton, and Rolando Arguelles for Mr. Gonzalez.
And are you Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, are both parties ready to proceed, state?
State is ready.
Defense?
Defense is ready, Your Honor.
All right, let's bring the jurors. Just 1 second. State, do you have your witness?
Yes, we can put her up, Judge.
Yes.
No, I'm just getting ready.
Okay, it happens.
All over the place. You wanna put that in here so we don't.
No, I'm just looking for the other, I'm looking for the other.
All right, just take a seat here, please. Okay.
I gave you some yesterday.
Hello. Hi. All right, we're ready.
All right, for the jury.
Yes. Sure. Yes, thank you. All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, state, call your next witness.
The state calls Crystal Ferguson.
Could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, you can lower your hand. Make sure you keep your voice up so that members of the jury and the court reporter can hear. If you'll state your name for the record.
My name is Detective Crystal Ferguson.
Detective Ferguson, will you please take a minute and introduce yourself to the jury?
Sure. Again, my name is Detective Crystal Ferguson. I've been on the department for 19 years. I've been at homicide for 7 years. I've worked suicides, homicides, murders. I've worked on gang unit. I've also worked various positions on patrol, bike patrol, as a detective and an officer.
And what law enforcement agency do you work for?
I work for the San Antonio Police Department.
And how long have you been a homicide detective?
7.5 years.
And during your 7.5 years, how many homicide cases have you worked on? Roughly.
Probably close to, with everything, probably about 80 or more. I don't know, depending on like people we assist, not just our cases, but we also help, assist with another detective when we go out to scenes. So we do multiple. I mean, probably in all those years that I've been there.
Can you tell me a little bit about the training and experience you have that qualifies you to be a homicide detective?
Sure. I've actually, I've been to various investigative schools, taken upon myself also as well to go to various, investigative schools. They also send us, through the department, obviously to get training on any type of, like scene recreations, firearms, instrument tools, you know, like for, knives, things like that. That's pretty much, I mean, all the training that we get.
And what are your duties as a homicide detective?
We get called out to suicides, suspicious deaths, and homicide murders.
And when you say you get called out, what do you do generally speaking for those cases?
So if we have like a murder, we have the sergeants that get a phone call from someone and, you know, from whoever's gonna be, like usually a night CID or somebody if it's on at night. If it's during the day, we get a call from a sergeant, whoever's on scene, and asks us to come to the scene to start the investigation.
On October 3rd of 2021, were you working in the homicide unit?
Yes, ma'am.
And on that date, did you get assigned to a murder involving a victim by the name of Isaac Aguilar?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you write a report with regard to your involvement in that case?
Yes, ma'am.
Would it help your testimony here today to have that report with you on your testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
Detective, I'm gonna hand you what have been marked as States Exhibit 35 and 36. Feel free to refresh your recollection, but please don't read directly from it.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me what States Exhibit 35 is?
Long report. I apologize, ma'am. I'm trying to look for the property stuff with the actual evidence on it. I apologize.
No, that's all right. We can get you a copy of that. Detective, States Exhibit 35, is that the report you generated for this case?
Yes,
And did you write a supplement to that initial report?
yes,
And is that what is in States Exhibit number 35?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you tell me the address of the location of the scene that you investigated on October 3rd?
Yes, I believe it was 1717 Leal. Yes,
Is that here in Bear County?
yes, ma'am.
And why were you called out to 1717 Leal Street?
I was told by my sergeant that there was a male that had been stabbed at the house and that he had been transported to the hospital, then he had passed away.
So when you get assigned to that case, what is the first thing that you do?
Obviously we go out to the scene to go assess the scene. We get a search warrant for a house, depending on, we ended up finding out that everything happened outside though. And then we assess the scene, talk with CSI, possibly any witnesses, and then we have witnesses go back to our headquarters and normally conduct interviews.
And did you go out to the scene on this day?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to show you what's previously been marked and admitted. State's exhibits number 1. And state's exhibit number 4, I believe. Do you recognize those?
Yes, ma'am.
And what do they depict, Detective?
The actual crime scene.
Okay, Detective, and is this how it appeared by the time that you arrived at the scene?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember if it was day or night, sun up or sundown when you arrived?
I remember it was like dusk. It was starting to, sun was already starting to go down, but we were in there through the night. I do remember that.
And when you arrived, what's the first thing that you did?
I remember we looked at the scene, but I remember contacting the CSI that were out there to see what they had processed.
And why is it important to contact the CSI when you arrive at the crime scene?
One, because they were already out there, and they usually are the ones who collect any type of evidence. And I don't want to make sure that there is something, maybe if you know, when they're taking photos or they're taking video, a lot of times I don't want to get in the middle of a scene while they're trying to process everything. So I usually like to know what they saw, where things were placed, you know, just to make sure that nothing had been moved. Just to make sure that everything's still in the original condition when I get there.
Show you what has previously been marked as State's Exhibit number 10 and admitted. This is State's Exhibit number 10 is CSI Oliva's sketch. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you direct her in the creation of this sketch?
No.
Was it helpful in your investigation?
Yes.
Okay, why was it helpful in your investigation?
Well, because it also tells you where every piece of evidence had been marked, you know, where something had been laid, or if there was, whatever they collected is usually numbered. And so it'll usually, it'll help us out, you know, to know where things had happened, especially when we go back later to write our reports as well.
All right, Detective, I'm handing you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 37. What is State's Exhibit 37?
The property report.
I want to focus particularly on the items that were connected by CSI Oliva. Do you have items? Are you aware of items connected collected by CSI Oliva?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So with regard to the sketch that we have on the screen there, do you recall what item number 1 was? E1. As collected by CSI Oliva.
I believe it was the knife. I believe.
I'm showing you it's been previously marked as State's Exhibit number 1. So State's Exhibit number 1 was indeed collected at the bottom of the slide, as depicted in the sketch and in State's Exhibit 14, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked and admitted as State's Exhibit number 13. What does that depict, Detective?
Picture of the the slide, that had some, apparent blood.
And at the time that you arrived, did it look exactly like that or did it look different?
Probably gonna be about the same. I mean, usually they leave everything out, like I said, when I get there, so. It would be.
So after you get the layout of the scene, and take note of the items of evidence that might be important and certainly what's been, collected from the CSIs, what do you do next?
From there, like I said, we try to gather any witnesses, that we see and we get them sent back. So whoever was helping me at the time for Wing would, be interviewing, some witnesses at headquarters.
And did you identify witnesses present for this case?
Yeah, we did. They were not at the scene when I arrived, though.
Okay,
No, they had already been sent back by another detective.
and they're not being interviewed by you, correct?
No,
They're obviously
No,
on the
I did
scene.
not interview those witnesses, no.
What did you do next?
I believe we had gone into to the home. We had a search warrant, and we had gone into the home.
And was anything of importance, noted or collected from the home?
Um. I believe so, I have to look. Can I refer to my report?
Yes.
I don't believe so, ma'am. I don't remember us taking anything from there.
Roughly how long were you at the scene of the crime?
Got dark there for a while. It was a few hours. I
A
can
few
tell you,
hours.
yeah.
And during the course of your initial investigation, were you able to identify a suspect?
Yes,
Who was that suspect?
Angel Gonzalez.
What did you do next after leaving the scene of the crime?
I believe we had gone back to we'd gone back to headquarters and, actually, we had done some initial canvassing, actually, I believe for surveillance, and then usually we'll go back.
What is canvassing?
Canvassing is normally when we go to homes and we'll look for video. A lot of times people have Ring video cameras. Somebody could have been outside because of the time of day. We usually try to contact, people.
And did you find any videos or any additional witnesses for this case?
No, unfortunately, no.
At some point, was a warrant for the arrest of Angel Gonzalez generated and signed?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall how long from October 3rd to, or do you recall what date the defendant was apprehended?
Again, if I can refer to my report, but I believe it was October 10th, somewhere around there. I'd have to look.
Please refer to your reports.
Thank you. Okay, it would have October 9th. It's like
October 9th.
October 9th, 2021.
And did you have the opportunity to briefly meet with Angel Gonzalez?
Yes, in the interview room.
Do you see that individual here in the courtroom today?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you please identify him by an item of clothing that he's wearing?
Gray button-up shirt.
Let the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant. So after the defendant is apprehended, what were the next steps in your investigation after October 9th?
After interviewing him,
Correct.
After interviewing him, I usually, any of the preliminary, anything that we have to do for follow-up, like, cell phones. Normally we'll connect any type of, we'll take a buccal swab, like a DNA swab from someone.
Can you take a minute to describe what a buccal swab or a DNA swab is?
Sure, it is a buccal swab. Normally sounds like it's funny, but it's a long cotton swab, basically. And we rub the inside of the cheek, the left and the right cheek. We get, DNA for comparison for anything that we found at the scene, and then we send it into the lab.
And do you know if a buccal swab was done in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that pursuant to a warrant?
Yes, ma'am.
Who was the buccal swab taken from?
From Angel Gonzales.
And who took the buccal swab from him? Who got the defendant's DNA?
I did.
What did you do with the buccal swab after you collected it?
We placed it in the property room.
And do you have that item here with you today?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you know that the item that you brought here today is the item that you collected from the defendant?
We know because we generate a barcode with our case number, and each piece of evidence is marked with a unique barcode number, property room number.
What is the case number for this case?
This one's going to be SAPD 21196680.
Is that the number that's on top of your prosecution guide?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that the number that is on the buccal swab you brought with you?
Yes, ma'am.
And you said it was placed in the property room, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that a secure facility?
Yes, ma'am.
Does just anybody have access to the property room, or is it specific people?
No, it's a secured facility. No, not everybody is allowed in there. We have to have special access to it.
And do you have access to it?
Yes, ma'am.
Marking the buccal swab as state's exhibit number 38.
I'm sorry, 38.
Detective, would you please open state's exhibit number 38 and take a brief look at the contents of it? Is the buccal swab in the same or substantially similar condition as the day that you collected it?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, state would offer state's exhibit 38 into evidence.
No objection, sir.
All right, State's Exhibit number 38 is admitted without objection.
So I want to talk a little bit more about buccal swabs, generally speaking. What is a known standard, if you know, in terms of buccal swabs and things of that nature?
You're talking about like as far as, I'm sorry, can you reword the question again? Just
Yeah. What is the purpose of collecting the buccal swab?
Oh, to collect it from whoever we're collecting the DNA swab from is so that we can compare it to any of the evidence that we found on scene.
And would you also, or would someone also collect a known sample of some kind from a victim in this type of case?
Yes,
Do you know if that was done in this case?
Yes.
And how do you know that that was done?
Well, because of usually with the medical examiner's office. Well,
Did you attend the autopsy for this case?
on this one, let me refer, if you don't mind, because at that time, COVID was going on and they were very much, yes, you can, no, you can, kind of, at that time, it was a little. No, I don't believe I did, ma'am.
Would that have been due to the COVID restrictions that were
Yeah.
going on?
Yes, because this was 21. Yeah, that would have been during that time.
Would it be typical for you now or prior to COVID to have attended an autopsy?
Oh, yes.
Why is it important for you to attend an autopsy if you have the ability to do so?
The doctors will normally explain, for instance, with gunshot wounds, entry, exits. If somebody was shot, let's say in the back versus the front, and or somebody was stabbed, where they were stabbed, they'll explain to us if it's in a downward trajectory up, upwards. And it's also helpful because they will normally, a lot of times you can also, depending on what is being told to you at the time, if somebody gives you an explanation of what happened, let's say at a scene, compared to what is being told to us by the doctor, we can see if somebody's being truthful with us or not.
Although you did not attend the autopsy yourself, did you ultimately receive an autopsy report from the medical examiner's office during the course of your investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall receiving a cause and manner of death report from the medical examiner's office as well?
Yes, ma'am.
And if there was a buccal swab taken and collected for this case, would it be routine for the medical examiner to then collect a known sample from the victim they're examining?
Oh, yes.
Do you know if that was done in this case?
Yes, because whenever I sent a request from the lab to have DNA comparisons, we have to request from the medical examiner through they have a ME number, which is their case number that identifies whoever they're taking their samples from.
And were the buccal swab and the known standard from the victim in the case submitted to the laboratory along with the swabbings taken from the crimes?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you receive an analysis back from the crime lab with regard to the items submitted?
Yes, we did.
At this time, the state would pass the witness, Your Honor.
Right, defense.
Good afternoon, Detective Ferguson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
Detective Ferguson, you've previously identified my client, Angel Gonzalez, correct?
Yes.
May I approach her?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as offense exhibit number 1. You recognize the person in this picture?
Yes.
Who is that?
Andrew Gonzales.
Now I'm going to show you what's been marked as offense exhibit number 2. Do you recognize the person in this picture? Who is that?
Andrew Gonzales.
Now I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number 3. Who is that?
Angel Gonzalez. That's all we can-
Now I'm gonna show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number 4. Who is that a picture of?
Angel Gonzalez.
And now I'm gonna show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number 5. Who is that a picture of?
His face is covered up partially, but I'm assuming Angel Gonzalez.
Well, I don't want you to assume.
Yeah,
want
I
you to-
don't know. I can't, I mean, his face is partially covered, sir, so I can't. Looks like his eyes. Yes,
Thank you. Thank you, Detective.
no problem. You're fine.
I'm gonna tender it over to state, see if they have any objection.
When we approach her.
Yes.
Detective, I'm gonna show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number 1.
Mhm.
And you just stated this is a picture of Angel Gonzalez, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this picture was taken when he was arrested.
Yes, when he was apprehended. Yes, sir.
Defense exhibit number 2.
Mhm.
You just testified that this is Angel Gonzalez again, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this is a picture that was taken of injuries that he had when he was arrested.
Yes, sir.
What about defense exhibit number 3? Do you recognize him?
Fine. Yeah, Angel Gonzalez.
And do you know when this picture?
No.
Thank you.
All right, and I'm sorry, the last question that was related
I'm
to
gonna
which,
go to the last
okay, which exhibit was it related to?
3.
Okay, thank you.
So right over to state counsel for any objection on the voting.
Objection.
All right, so no objections to,
1 and 2.
Permission to publish them?
all right, just one moment. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have you all step outside for 10 minutes and I will bring you back. Remember my previous instructions, all right? All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors.
Just that.
Yes.
And then your microphone is on now.
Thank God.
So Anna,
Hi,
when
Glinda
are
Frick.
you leaving?
When am I leaving? March 4.
Yeah, so
Okay.
next week or last week.
At least you got one trial. I did.
Yeah. It's okay, that's why I have to get another person in here, so I can be like, you and Zach.
Are you ready?
All right, for the jury.
Just one second. We lost you. If you, excuse me, just everyone, please be seated. Deputy Laura, the charge, it's not charged.
But it's in the frontage.
Ah. Bring defense exhibits 1 and 2.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, any objection?
No.
All right, then defense 1 and 2 is admitted without objection. You may
Permission to
just
publish?
grant it.
Detective, I'm gonna show you what's been marked as offense exhibit number 1. And what is this a picture of?
Of Angel Gonzales, the day he was apprehended.
And what can we observe right here on his right eyebrow?
A cut of some sort, like a mark, red, I could see like blood or something on it. I'm sorry, there's like a glare.
Glare?
Yes.
All right, if you need to step down, you can step down into the well.
Didn't go there, said.
Just to make it easier. So what is this a picture of right here?
Right there, an abrasion.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to keep your voice up.
Sorry, an abrasion.
And what about right here on top of his right lip?
Again, it looks like another abrasion.
Right, there we go.
Mhm.
Now I'm gonna show you what's been marked as offense exhibit number 2. And what is this a picture of?
Of his nose, and there's a cut to his nose.
And would this cut be consistent with the knife cut?
I mean, normally you'd have something more on the face, I mean, to do, I mean, a whole.
Judge,
I'm sorry, if
I
you could
can't
keep
hear
your
him.
voice up,
Keep
please.
this
Sorry,
up.
can I go back?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
If
can you
you-
state your question again? I'm sorry.
Yes. In defense exhibit number 2, we just set up that is the laceration to his nose, correct?
A cut, yeah, it looks like a cut to his nose, yes, sir.
And would that be consistent with the knife cut?
Objection, Your Honor.
Um,
Witness would have no knowledge of what is consistent or not. I could.
All right,
She
you
can
can lay the,
answer- She has knowledge
defense.
or not.
you can lay the foundation for her to answer that question if she can.
Um,
I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Ask your question.
Officer,
mhm,
in your training and experience as a
Mhm.
detective, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
detective,
you're fine.
would this be consistent with the knife cut?
Um, it's kind of hard to say, actually, so that day I actually had asked him, but he asked for his lawyer, so I couldn't ask him
Judge,
to.
can
When
we
we approach-
approach?
I'm sorry. Did I say something wrong?
Yes, just one moment.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the last answer from the detective from this witness you are to disregard in its entirety. Does everyone understand? All right, does every,
Oh, Judge, if I could just approach very briefly.
yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as I told you during voir dire, that everyone has a right to have an attorney. Does everyone understand that? And everyone has a constitutional right to remain silent. Does everyone understand that? And everybody, if the police were to seek to question them, they have every right to have an attorney present with them. That's the laws of the United States. Does everyone understand? So for example, if someone were to come to any citizen and want to ask them questions about anything, if it were an officer or if it were a prosecutor, they have every right to have an attorney present. Does everyone understand? And there are many reasons that people do that because, for example, sometimes in the legal field, if you have not been in law school, if you've never had contact maybe with someone from law enforcement or a prosecutor, you have no idea about what's going on and you may want to have an attorney. But that is not to be considered whatsoever. Does everyone understand? So you are to wholly disregard the last statement by the witness. Does everyone understand? You are not to consider at all. It is not a part of the evidence in this case. Does everyone understand? Is there anyone here who cannot do that? All right, I'll take that as a fact that everyone can follow my instructions. Defense, is there anything else?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, any further questions of the witness?
Oh, no, no, I need to proceed with the witness.
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Detective Ferguson, you mentioned that you've been on the force for 19 years,
Yes, sir.
7.5 roughly in homicide.
Yes, sir.
And as part of being in homicide, you testified that you investigate suicides,
Mhm.
homicides, as well as murders.
Yes, sir.
Throughout your experience and all the homicides that you've done, have
Mhm.
any of them been ruled to be an accident?
Any of the murders,
Homicides that you've
Homicides.
investigated?
accidents, accidental deaths on their own, yes, but if that's what you're asking, can you rephrase the question? I'm not sure. what you're-
Absolutely. So when you investigate a homicide, which
Mhm.
involves more than one person, correct?
Yes.
Have they ever been ruled to be an accident?
No, none of mine have, no.
Have any of them come to you that they were actually self-defense?
Yes, we have had some.
And in the self-defense cases that you've investigated, what were the contributing factors?
That I don't know if I should say, someone that was, introduced a weapon into, let's say, a deadly weapon into a, like somebody was having an argument and whoever introduced the deadly weapon, person tried to defend themselves. Normally, I mean, those are the ones that I've had, yes.
And what are some of the factors that you consider? For example, do you consider the height of the person?
I consider the deadly weapon to begin with. If someone's having a fight and then someone introduces the deadly weapon, that's, I mean, the other person does have a right to defend themselves.
And just to clarify, a deadly weapon can be anything.
Yes, it can be a knife, it could be a gun, it could be, yeah, anything that you can use to kill somebody, yes.
Could be a pen.
Somebody can kill somebody with it, yes.
Are there any other factors that you consider besides the deadly weapon?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. Maybe, what are you talking about? Like male, female, like if it's height, weight?
Absolutely. Anything that you would consider.
Yes, I mean, there's a different, every case is different, sir, so I can't give you a generalization for every single case that I've done.
Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's the best
Do
I
you
can do.
consider family history?
If I have that, yes, if I have that knowledge, yes, at the time.
Do you consider difference in age?
We can, if it's an elderly person versus a younger person, yes.
Difference in size or weight?
Yes, you can,
Difference in height?
you can.
What about any history of abuse?
If I have that knowledge, yes.
Okay. So let's move forward to this day. On October 3rd, at what time did you arrive on scene?
Can I look at my report? Are you
Absolutely.
fine with it? Okay. Okay, this is saying my notification was at 22:15 hours.
And in layman's terms, what time is that?
That's saying about 10:15.
And how long were you there for?
A few hours.
A few is just because that could be different for everybody. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours.
It could have been 2 to 3 hours, sir.
And while you were there, what were you doing primarily?
Looking at the scene, looking at the evidence that they had, CSI. We had gone into the home also to see if maybe the weapon or anything, maybe it was, anything else like was there, or the family, anybody else that may have had knowledge of what happened. But they had told me they had transported people already at that point. We usually stay and canvass the area as well.
And just to clarify, you were the lead detective on this case, correct?
Yes, sir.
And to be a little bit more descriptive, when you say looking at the scene and walking the scene,
Mhm.
were there markers already on the scene? Like the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5?
Yes, there's markers there.
So you walked every single one of them.
Normally I go with a CSI person and we go like each one and they'll explain to me what something is or was, especially if there's something that they need to collect because of weather or different reasons. And they have to, they'll tell me, hey, this was here, but we had to collect whatever. I usually go, yes, usually with the CSI, whoever the main one is there, and go through all the pieces of evidence normally, yes.
And you observed the different blood marks that were left throughout the whole scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of blood, yeah.
I need you to slow down, please, just for the record's sake.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
And to your knowledge,
Mhm.
Isaac was on the slide, correct?
Yes, that's what I was told, yes, sir.
That's where he was picked up by EMS and transported to the hospital.
From what yes, they said he had laid back on the slide.
And after that, you went and conducted interviews?
No, they, another detective had interviewed the witnesses at at headquarters.
But you actually conducted an interview on Angel Gonzales.
Well, yes, sir. But not that same day.
And as part of the interview, self-defense was raised.
Can I say?
You're on the
I don't,
approach.
I know that's kind of
Yes.
like you just told me not to say that.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, and you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective, as part of your investigation, several witnesses were interviewed.
Yes, sir.
And out of all the witnesses that were interviewed, none of them said where the knife came from, correct?
I did not interview those people, sir. It was the other.
If-
Can I refer to my report?
Absolutely.
No, sir.
And where were their interviews conducted of the individuals?
At headquarters.
The date?
Oh, the date, the same date or it's gonna be, I'm sorry, October 3rd.
So that would have been like the eve or the night of
Yes.
October 3rd?
Mhm.
And in this case, you submitted a complaint, correct?
Yes,
And the affidavit was submitted on October 4th, 4:12 a.m.?
I'm sorry, rephrase the question again? What are you?
The affidavit for the arrest warrant
Mhm,
was signed and submitted by you
mhm.
on October, I'm sorry, we can't use or we have to say either yes
Yes,
or no,
sir.
sorry, thank you. On October 4th at 4:12 a.m.?
Do you have my warrant with me that I could?
May I approach, Sean?
Yes.
Thank you. Maybe this will help you refresh your recollection. And I'll rephrase, October 4th at 4:12 p.m.
Yes, sir.
And that's your signature right there?
On the top, yes.
And that's your badge number?
Yes.
And on this case, you testified that there was, probably mispronounced this, buccal swabs collected, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you submitted this complaint or affidavit before you got the results of that?
Yes, sir.
And even though you had no knowledge, because none of the witnesses said that they saw Angel Gonzalez had a knife, you filed this complaint stating that the defendant intentionally caused the death of Isaac.
I did not say that they didn't say he had a knife. You asked me if they said where the knife came from. No, I don't believe that anybody said where it came from, but they did say that, it's in my report, that Aguilar said that he was stabbed, that his brother had stabbed him.
Correct, but none of the witnesses, or anyone for that matter, knows where the knife came from, correct?
Where the knife came from.
Or saw him get stabbed? Is that in your report?
I would have to look, but during the interviews, yeah, they were saying that he was stabbed by his brother. That was the whole thing. They identified him. Everybody signed. Something, they know him. They were all family at the party.
Can you tell me who said that? Who said, which of the witnesses said that they saw Angel stab Isaac?
Can I look at my report?
Absolutely.
Okay. I believe they said that he said that he was stabbed by him, and they were the two that were fighting.
So in other words, nobody said that.
Can I read from here what it says? It says Christine stated that,
No,
Can I?
ma'am. You can
Okay,
only
well then-
refresh the recollection
okay.
from your report.
okay, well, on it said that there was. What? One of the witnesses states that,
Detective,
mhm,
which witness?
Christine Rodriguez.
So Christine Rodriguez said that Isaac had the knife, or that Angel had the knife, I'm sorry?
No, she said that Aguilar had stated,
I'm gonna object to hearsay, Your Honor.
All
I
right,
will ask you, I will
Just,
be,
just 1 second. So if you repeat your last question, and then you're allowed to answer the question.
I'll be more clear with my question. Which of the witnesses said that Angel stabbed Isaac? That they saw him?
none of them said they saw him.
No further questions, pass the witness.
State.
Yes, Judge. Detective, did you, or another detective interview Juliet Rodriguez?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you or another detective interview Christine Rodriguez?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you or another detective interview an eyewitness individual by the name of Moses Perez?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you or another detective interview an eyewitness by the name of Angelica Diaz?
Yes, ma'am.
And did those interviews play a part in your decision to issue an arrest warrant for the individual sitting at this table?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know if there was any mention of self-defense by any of those individuals?
No, ma'am.
Detective, I'm going to show you what have been marked States Exhibits 39, 40, and 41. Do you recognize these photos?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you recognize them to be photos of?
Of Angel Gonzalez, his face,
An objection, may we approach?
Yes,
arm, no.
yes, you can approach.
Sorry, I interrupted you, Detective. What are they photographs of?
Of Angel Gonzalez.
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of Angel Gonzalez on the day that you met with him, October 9th, 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would offer States Exhibits 39, 40, and 41 into evidence.
Yes.
Detective, did you meet with the defendant on the day that he was arrested?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, state moves to admit states exhibits 39, 40, and 41.
No objections, Judge.
All right, States Exhibit 39, 40, and 41 are admitted without objection.
May I publish?
Yes.
Detective, what are we looking at here in States Exhibit 39?
I'm sorry, can you say one more time? Couldn't hear you.
What are we looking at in 39? States Exhibit number 2.
It was a photo of, Angel Gonzalez.
Right, and I believe in this photograph
Your
here,
Honor, may we take this witness on board outside the presence of the jury?
Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, remember the court's previous instructions. I will have you all back here in 10 minutes. All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors.
I'm not sure.
All right, everyone, please be seated.
may I respond for,
Yes.
Your Honor, the time for voir dire was prior to the evidence being admitted into evidence. It's improper at this time. The items are already admitted into evidence and the jury has the ability to see them.
Yes.
If I may, and Judge, you tell me if I need to sit down and let Rolando speak, because
Yeah.
some judges, they want us to keep consistent. That here's the problem. Yes, those exhibits are admitted, but our objection are to the questions, because the questions as to, we want to know if, before they do this in front of the jury, if this detective has any knowledge of the source of these injuries and how she knows that. Because if they're going to try to elicit that kind of testimony from her, we have a right to have her establish her basis of knowledge for that before those questions are propounded in front of the jury.
All right, so that is something that needs to be handled through an objection. If there's a question that is asked and you all have an objection to it, then you can make your objection.
Then we'll object to the line of questioning that she seemed to be going into. And if we need to object as we go,
Yes.
that's fine.
Yes, because here's the thing, everybody. I have no idea where the questioning is going. So what will end up happening is the jury is going to be brought back in. They're going to be back in here in 5 more minutes. And you all can make your objections as the questions are asked. And I will make my ruling. Okay? All right, and Deputy, let me let them know whenever they're ready to come back in.
You want me to go get it?
Yes, if they're ready, we can take it up.
I'm finishing today.
I mean, that's gonna drag. I know. I think we can get them on today.
Be like, hey, what's your name? Okay, Kathy, good. That's it.
If only all trials
Right.
went that way, right?
I keep hoping.
We're ready.
All right, for the jury.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, state, it's still your witness. You may proceed with your questions.
Of course, Judge. Detective, in State's Exhibit number 39, I see here that there seems to be some kind of injury to his left nostril, or excuse me, his right nostril. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What about to his right eyebrow? Do you see an injury there as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 40. What does that appear to be?
An abrasion and injury.
To the elbow area?
I'm very sorry. It's really hard to see with the glare.
All right, if you can step down, if you want to step down into the well.
And Detective, if you just want to stand here, you might have, Diana might be able to hear you a little bit better. Yes, to the elbow. Okay, and I'm gonna show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 41. What does that appear to be?
An abrasion in the hand.
And we talk about the hand and the elbow. Are those the hand and the elbow of the defendant, Angel Gonzalez?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You can sit back down.
Oh, no problem.
And did you observe those injuries on October 9th, the day that you met with him?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Where did you meet with Angel Gonzalez at?
At police headquarters.
In a specific room?
Yes, in our homicide, the interview rooms that we have.
What is special about those homicide rooms?
It's a room where we can be able to speak with them, but it's quiet, we don't have to worry about outside anybody coming in or anything like that while we're speaking to them.
Are there recording devices in those rooms?
Yes, ma'am.
And was there a video recording device in the room that you met with Angel Gonzalez in?
Yes, ma'am.
I know your interview or your interaction with the defendant was brief. What can you tell me?
Your Honor, can we approach again, please?
All right, State.
What can you tell me about the defendant's demeanor when you were not in the interview room and watching from the camera?
He seemed very relaxed.
When you say relaxed, can you describe a little bit of what you mean?
He did not, he wasn't, everybody acts differently, when they come in, but, he just seemed very, relaxed, was laying down on the floor. Just things of that nature, just,
Detective, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 42. What is State's Exhibit number 42?
the photo of, Angel Gonzalez laying on the floor.
And that is during the time that he was in the San Antonio interview room?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of him in the room at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, State moves to admit State's Exhibit number 42.
Yes. All right, State's Exhibit number 42 will be admitted.
May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
Detective, what are we looking at in State's Exhibit number 42?
Photo of Angel Gonzalez at police headquarters laying on the ground.
Detective, I'm going to show you the contents, excuse me, of State's Exhibit 30 that has been previously admitted into evidence. Do you know what State's Exhibit number 30 is?
Yeah, that's gonna be a knife that she's,
Was it the knife that was collected from the scene of the crime?
yes, ma'am.
Do you know how to close this knife?
Um,
Would it surprise you if somebody in this courtroom did know how to close this knife?
no, it would not.
Ask the witness.
Right.
Can we approach briefly,
Yes.
Judge?
All right. State, are you passing the witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, defense.
Nothing further with witness.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Subject to recall, please.
All right, just make sure you're available if someone decides to call you back.
Okay.
All right, state, call your next witness.
The state calls Garen Foster.
And Diana, do you need to sub out any exhibits? Diana, are you ready? Oh, please have a seat. All right, everyone, it's just that when evidence is submitted, there's a special form that the court reporter needs in order to take custody of that evidence. So we're waiting to get the form. All right, could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
All right, you can lower your hand, state your name for the record.
My name is Garen Foster, Garon Foster, Foster.
All right, state.
Yes, Judge. Mr. Foster, where do you work?
I'm employed at the Bexar County Criminal Investigation Laboratory in San Antonio.
And what do you do there?
I'm the forensic scientist supervisor of our forensic serology, forensic DNA section.
And what training or experience did you need to have in order to achieve that position?
From an educational standpoint, I received a bachelor's degree in zoology from the University of Texas at Austin, and then a master's of science in forensic science from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. That position, as well as the others involved with that, I required additional coursework in genetics, molecular biology, biochemistry, statistics, and population genetics.
And the Bexar County Crime Lab, is that an accredited laboratory?
Yes, it is.
And is the accrediting agency recognized by the Texas Forensic Science Commission?
Yes, it is.
What does it mean to be accredited?
Accreditation means that your laboratory or whatever entity has met whatever the industry standard is. So for example, in the forensic sciences, it's the procedures, it's the quality assurance, it's the training of the personnel, it's the safety, it's the security of the building, everything that you could think of from an auditing standpoint to be accredited.
And is the accrediting organization recognized and accepted internationally?
Yes, it is.
And with regard to DNA and forensic analysis, have you been proficiency tested in this scope or discipline?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, proficiency testing means that an individual has received items of evidence that we call blind. You don't know what the answer is going to be. And then whatever procedures that you're conducting in the laboratory, you conduct on the proficiency analysis. And we do this 2 times per calendar year, and we submit these items of evidence as well as the results to the proficiency testing provider, again, without knowing what the correct results would be. And then the correct results are submitted to our quality assurance manager to ensure that we have the correct answers.
And when was the last time that you were proficiency tested?
We do it twice a year. I believe the last time was 4 months ago, which means within the next month or 2, I will be receiving my next set of proficiency tests.
Are you licensed as a forensic analyst by the Texas Forensic Science Commission?
Yes, I'm a forensic DNA analyst.
And have you received any additional training in the area of DNA analysis?
Yes, I've received plenty of training in the 30 years that I've been doing this in various workshops at a regional, state, and national level, including specifically forensic DNA analysis from the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Quantico, Virginia.
And have you testified in Bear County before as an expert witness in the area of DNA or serology analysis?
Yes, in both forensic serology as well as forensic DNA analysis.
How many times? Many or few?
I would say many.
Let's first talk about serology. What is serology?
Serology from a forensic standpoint is the examination of items that are biological in nature. Typically, you would think of blood or seminal fluid, saliva, and trying to identify those biological fluids that are cellular rich so that the potential for a forensic DNA profile could be developed.
And in March of 2022, did you routinely perform serological analysis for the Bear County Crime Lab if submitted by a law enforcement agency?
Yes, I did.
Do you recall doing a forensic serology report under CIL case number 210-05960?
Yes, I recall releasing a report with that criminal investigation laboratory number on March 10th, 2022.
And do you have a copy of that report there with you?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Excellent. Do you recall what the SAPD case number was in relation to that CIL number?
Yes, the unique San Antonio Police Department case number was 21196-680.
Now, with regard to the evidence that was analyzed by yourself, I want to focus specifically on just a few items. Let's discuss what is in reference in your report as item 1-2. Did you conduct a forensic serological examination of item 1-2?
Yes, I was asked to examine this item for the possible presence of blood. Item 1-2 was swabs that were labeled E1A, swab of knife.
What can you tell me about item in your report 1-3?
1-3 was a shirt. It was a black Nike shirt in which I also examined for the possible presence of blood.
And item 1-4, what can you tell me about that?
Those were swabs, and on the outside of the swab envelope said E3 backyard.
And item 1-5?
Those were also swabs that were labeled E4 fan, FAN.
1-6?
Those were also swabs that said they were collected from item E5 driveway.
Item 1-7?
Again, a pair of swabs that was labeled E6 sidewalk.
We're gonna skip one and we're gonna go to item 1-9. What is that?
Item 1-9 was a switchblade knife that was indicated as E1 by the law enforcement agency.
All right, Mr. Foster, I'm going to show you states exhibits 24, 25, 26, 27, and 29. Are those some of the items that you examined in relation to this case?
Yes, ma'am. These are some of the items in which I examined in this investigation.
And are those some of the items that we just went over?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So, what can you tell me specifically about the items we just discussed?
I was asked to examine these for the possible presence of blood. So the laboratory would perform a chemical color test. It's very simply two chemicals that are added together that are colorless, similar to water, but in the presence of blood, a color change would occur. And then when that color change occurs, it's a presumptive, it's possibly blood. So I was asked on all of those items in which we discussed to conduct that analysis.
And did you conduct that analysis on those items we've discussed?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And with specifically those items which we have discussed, did you reach a conclusion about whether there was the possible presence of blood on those items?
Yes, they were all positive for the possible presence of blood.
Now, in the area, or I guess in your role as a forensic analyst, if there is a possible presence of blood on an item, what happens to it next, that item?
Well, the reason we're testing it is for DNA analysis. If the possible presence of blood is positive, and blood is a cellular rich substance, we would typically then perform DNA analysis. We may do it right at that time, or we would preserve the item for future testing. And in this case, that's what happened. So each one of those swabs that I've mentioned, or the shirt, the swabs were taken or cutting was taken, and it's placed into a sterile container and then placed into a secure freezer. And then it awaits the DNA analysis until I can perform that, which is typically done within a few months.
Did you perform the DNA analysis on those items?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Before we get to the DNA analysis on those items, what is a known standard?
A known standard would we call a reference standard. So a crime scene sample may not know who the DNA belongs to, but a reference standard would be a swab typically taken from the inside of an individual's mouth. And we would know that this came from, for example, this person. In the case of the deceased, the medical examiner would take blood from that individual, and that would serve as the reference standard for the deceased.
Did you receive a buccal swab standard for an Angel Gonzalez in this case?
Yes, I did.
And did you receive a blood stain card for an Isaac Aguilar in this case?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And for the sake of clarity, do you know the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office number associated with the blood stain card in this case?
Yes, the blood stain card was identified as coming from the Bexar County Medical Examiner's case number 2021-2955.
Let's shift gears and go back to the items we previously discussed. Okay. With regard to item 1-2, was that tested for DNA analysis?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And now I'm gonna go to item 1-3, and you have it now divided 1-3 .1 and 1-3.2. And what are those described as?
Well, 1-3 was, I believe, a t-shirt. So I took two different cuttings from that t-shirt. So cutting number 1, we would need to give it a unique designation, and that was the 0.1. And then the second cutting from a different location on that t-shirt is designated as 0.2. So our two items from item 3-1 shirt is now 3-1.1, cutting number 1, 3-1.2, cutting number 2.
And why in the circumstance of the shirt, why wouldn't you just test the entire shirt?
Well, typically when you have an item, DNA analysis utilizes a very small portion of, and I mean, meaning it's, let's say the size of a BB as an example, or something extremely small. So if you have an entire shirt, it's not that the shirt is taken and placed into some kind of DNA machine or something. I would have to identify some item or location on that shirt. So for example, in this case, I would find what appears to be blood staining, the reddish brown staining I would perform the presumptive analysis on that. And I had done so on a swab on an area of the front side of the shirt, and then the same thing on an area on the back side of the shirt. So when we say if you tested the shirt, those were the two stains that were tested. But theoretically, if you were to take every thread off of a shirt, you could test thousands of stains per se that was on a shirt.
And were items 1-4 through 1-7 also tested for DNA analysis here?
Yes, ma'am.
And item 19.1 and 19.2.
That is correct.
So were those items that we just discussed then compared or analyzed in regard to the bloodstain card received from the medical examiner's office for Isaac Aguilar and the buckled standard for an Angel Gonzales?
Yes, they were.
What can you tell me about the conclusions with regard to those items?
Okay, if I start batching some of those items on where I was able to identify a genetic profile, we were able to find that Isaac Aguilar was not excluded as a donor of the human DNA on 1-2.1, which were the swab tips, E1A, swab of knife. It's not excluded also on the cutting number 1 from the T-shirt. That was item 1-3.1. Isaac Aguilar is also not excluded as a donor of cutting number 2 from the T-shirt designated as 1-3.2. Isaac Aguilar is also not excluded as a donor of the DNA identified on the swab tips from the backyard, as well as the swab tips from the fan. And in reference to swabbing taken from E1, the knife, the switchblade knife handle area is not excluded as a donor of the DNA.
With regard to the items we discussed, did you find Angel Gonzales to be not excluded from any of those items?
Yes, Angel Gonzales then was not excluded as a donor of the human DNA identified on the swab tips E5 from driveway, swab tips E6 from sidewalk, as well as the major genetic profile identified on the swabbing from E1, which was the switchblade knife.
So both individuals had DNA on the switchblade knife, or they're not excluded?
Yes, it was consistent with a mixture of 2 individuals on the knife blade. One of those individuals, that component we could fully resolve. And then on the other, we were able to look at all potential genetic material and genotypes available. And yes, the other individual was not excluded as well as a donor from that material.
Your Honor, at this time, today we pass the witness.
Defense.
I love DNA and I'm so excited to ever have you as a witness. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
So, and do you go by Mr. Forrester?
Mr. Foster is fine.
Foster, sorry. Judge, can I approach the witness?
Yes.
So while I'm marking a couple of exhibits, I'd like to just make clear that for continuity's sake, whenever you use your own numbering system, you still in your reports, you reference whatever the evidentiary numbers that came with those items to you as well, correct?
That's correct. If there's not an item number, then at least the description of the item will also be there.
Okay. And why do you put your own separate numbers?
Well, each item of evidence must receive a unique item number by the crime laboratory. So we can track that item through a chain of custody. It's not uncommon that we would receive an item from a law enforcement agency and they'll call this E1 as an example. And then a few other items maybe involved in the case will also come in, sometimes called E1. So from a unique standpoint, the laboratory will always assign a unique identifier, and then we would maintain that unique identifier from start to finish.
Great. And in your report, so you talked about the first report that you did, you generated, I believe it was March 10th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that was just a report, because the first step that you ever do with any kind of DNA analysis is you are told from somebody what kind of test they want you to run, right?
For the most part, that's correct. We're screening the items of evidence for potential biological material. And when we believe it's positive for something, we typically retain it for DNA analysis.
And are there differences between, say, DNA, like if I put my thumb and bleed on something versus if I happen to rub my hands or scratch my head or things like that?
Well, the DNA itself is exactly the same. However, the sources could be blood, sources could be saliva. When you said scratch your head, we're referring to cellular dandruff and so forth.
Well,
And
not me, but somebody.
Oh, me. Then yes, as long as there are cells present there and with a nucleus, then yes, the DNA would be the same there as well.
Okay, so DNA, however it comes, it doesn't change according to what it may be, whether it's blood, skin, semen, any kind of stuff that comes off or out of our bodies. Generally, you can get some kind of DNA from it under the right circumstances.
Right, and that is correct. And what we don't know, again, specifically would be the origin of that in reference to the biological soiling, blood or dandruff or any of the others.
Right. And so, and I'm guessing, but would it be a correct statement to say that the reason that you guys in the crime lab have your own numbers is because you don't work necessarily just for the police or the prosecutors. You're just there as scientists to do analysis and to conduct these tests and give the results, right?
Well, everything that you said is correct. That's not necessarily why we have unique identifiers. We have a unique identifier so that every item we examine, we can start to finish a chain of custody. But that is correct. We just receive items of evidence at the crime laboratory, not just from the law enforcement agency that was in this case, but multiple law enforcement agencies that theoretically could have the same item number that they have. But so we would give it our unique identifier.
And I know because I work in multiple counties, and I know that sometimes even other counties send their things to you for testing. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
And that's how I know your name and know your work. So I would like you to assist me in kind of breaking this down, because as long as I've been doing this, it's still hard for me. And I'm going to show you what is I've marked as defendants number 6. And this is defendants number 7 and defendants number 8. Now, with regard to the defendants number 7 and number 8, do these diagrams look to you to be consistent with the evidence item numbers that were submitted to you for testing in this case? So I'm going to start with you had mentioned that not your numbers, but I'm going by the report numbers. The E1 was designated as the knife, correct?
That is correct.
And then the E1A was designated as a swab of presumed or apparent blood on the knife. And
That
they
is
didn't-
correct.
They didn't say where.
E1A basically stated swabbing taken from knife.
Okay, and then we've got E2. And just to make it, I know you've got your numbers, but I'm just gonna use the numbers that are on the diagram here. The E2, that was the black T-shirt that was found on a slide, right? Or black T-shirt?
Exactly. We don't know exactly where something is collected unless it states it on the packaging material. But yes, in this case, it just stated E2. And then when I opened it up, it was a black T-shirt.
Okay, and you said that you took 2 cuttings from that item, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you talked about E3, that was a blood swab that was collected from the scene, right?
That is correct. And it was labeled on the packaging as backyard.
Okay, and then you had an E4 that was a swab taken, I believe that may have been labeled in your report also as blood swab taken from a fan.
That is correct.
Okay, and then we've got E5, which was a blood swab that was taken, I don't know what your report says, but it was taken also from near the yard. Is that right?
Yes, the outside of the packaging said E5 driveway.
The driveway there. Okay, and then I'm going to show you referencing here in Defense Exhibit number 8. There was also what was in your report came to you as an E6, another swab from the sidewalk. Is that correct?
That is correct. E6 was labeled sidewalk.
Okay. And Judge, I'm going to tender these to the state and ask that they be, I'm going to offer them and ask they be.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Clear. And did you ever get a copy of any of the diagrams or anything? Did that ever come to you as part of your testing or analysis of items?
No, ma'am. And specifically between these, I have not seen those before.
Okay, and so just so we're clear, I wrote these down and made these yellow marks on this was the CSI Oliva prepared the diagram, but I wrote these in just so when we're talking about it, you and me, and so the jury can see when we're talking about it, what items we're talking about, that this is consistent with what your report shows as to where these items were collected from. Yes?
Well, all I can say is that the item designation was correct. For example, when you state E5 driveway, of course, the assumption is that it is on a driveway, but I wasn't involved in the collection and no, I haven't seen those before.
Okay, and so, but just for the ease of talking about these items, if these were the designations where CSI Oliva had said that these items designated in your report where they had been found, you wouldn't have any reason to argue with that or to dispute that, right?
No, but I wouldn't have an opinion. I've never seen it.
Not asking you to even have an opinion.
Yes,
I-
ma'am.
You have plenty of opinions that we're interested in.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, defense is still your witness.
Thank you, Judge. And so, at this time, I would ask that, the previously discussed defense exhibit number 7, number 8, and, the number 6 that we've discussed be admitted.
Any objection?
No objection to 7 and 8, and for clarity, defense 6 is being offered as a demonstrative.
Correct.
No objection.
All right, thank you. Then 7 and 8 are admitted.
Okay. And now I'm gonna try to figure out how to work this. Okay. I don't know why this makes me so nervous. Okay, so I'm gonna just very quickly, just to kind of recap what we were talking about before. When and I've added here. This was the list of items. Now, did you receive a copy of this when things came to you, or did you not receive any?
No, ma'am, I did
Okay.
not receive that.
But these still will. These correspond to the items that you tested that we were discussing earlier, right?
Yes, ma'am, those highlighted areas correspond to those numbers that we just discussed.
And to be clear, these are just my notes that I added to the diagram to help me. I am a visual learner and a visual person, so it's just to help me understand where things were. And then we have, that was defense number 7 for the record. And now I'm showing you defense number 8. And then we had that item number E6, which was the swab from the sidewalk that was collected, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, I want to just talk to you very quickly. And I'm going to just start here. So when you make a report, you generally have kind of 3 main results that you come up with, right? So you've got not excluded, excluded, and inconclusive, correct?
That is correct. And typically that would be a comparison to an item of evidence. An individual is included, an individual is excluded, or a comparison to that item was inconclusive.
Okay. And so in this case, and Anna's already gone over a little bit, but basically what it boils down to is you're looking at these things and you're trying to say, is Isaac a contributor? Or is he excluded as a contributor, or is he not excluded? You're picking one of these 3 things with regard to the comparison to each of these items, with first with Isaac and then with Angel, right?
That's correct. We like to say that, ultimately we're helping determine who may have been the biological contributor of the human DNA identified on that item.
Okay. And so when you did your testing, actually there was E1, but your testing was even more specific, because if you refer to your report from, I believe it was June 27, your results, you narrowed it down to E1, the handle of the knife, and E1, the blade of the knife. Is that correct?
That is correct. There was a sample that was taken from E1, but that knife itself was submitted. And yes, I did swab the handle area. And then I also swabbed, which would be considered the blade area.
Okay. And let's talk about when you go through and you say that someone is not excluded, what does that mean as far as with each of the items? Does that mean that they are not excluded as being a contributor to the DNA that was found on that item?
That's correct. It means that I was unable to exclude an individual from that item based on a comparison of the human DNA on that item to the known reference standard that was provided to the laboratory.
Okay, and in the report that you created, there were some pretty, like, what I would consider like just astronomical numbers with regard to when you cannot exclude someone. And can you explain to the jury, let's see. And Judge, I'm just gonna, it's not gonna be an exhibit or anything, but I would just like to just write just a number, if I could. Okay, I've written a number here, and Judge, can I just show the jury what I've written down? And so this is 59, comma, 277, comma, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sets of triple zeros after. I took that from your report when somebody was not excluded as a contributor. So tell us what that means.
Yes, that is true. It is an extremely discriminating or a very large number. That number is what we call our random match probability. It's the probability of selecting an unknown, unrelated individual in the population that has that genetic profile. So for example, if an individual is not excluded as a donor, question would be, does everybody have that genetic profile? Does half the people in the population have that profile? No, given the fact that we are looking at so many different genetic markers today, each one of those genetic markers has its own individual statistic. And as they are multiplied against one another, because each one is independent, it becomes, if we have a full resolved profile, an extremely discriminating number. So that number specifically is, we would say this, that the probability of selecting an unknown, unrelated individual at random in the population that has that profile is approximately 1 in every 59 septillion individuals.
I don't even know what a septillion is, but it's just sounds like it's a number beyond even comprehension. Like, is there a way that you can even explain how big that number is?
I mean, if you were to use, for example, the population of the Earth and say there are 7, 8, maybe almost 9 billion individuals, if we were to divide this number by the population of the Earth, I mean, you would have to go through probably billions of individuals before you eventually find that profile again, statistically speaking. It was almost easier when we were looking at just 3 or 4 different genetic markers or our ABO blood typing, when 25% of the population have A. But now we're looking at a marker that maybe 10% of the population has, and then another marker, and then another marker, and then another. And when you start multiplying 1 over 10 or 10% times 10% times 10%, they start to go 1 over 10, 1 over 100, 1 over 1,000, 1 over 10,000. So we get this extremely discriminating number. But I agree, it's very large and almost seems confusing.
So just like a universe of Earths, like just as many Earths as we could ever contemplate, maybe even more than those we'd have to go through to find.
Yeah, we
Another
typically don't
person.
talk about it in the forms of Earths, but yes, we're talking billions upon billions of individuals before we would expect to find that genetic profile in the population again.
And with regard to this particular number, that was the number that you came up with regard to Isaac Aguilar as being not excluded from the items that you test or that you compared, correct?
Yes, for 7 of the items that were examined, we were able to fully resolve the profile where Isaac Aguilar was not excluded as a donor. That was the random match probability that was calculated.
And then for Angel, and I'm gonna write down another number. So another just really big number, and can you tell me what this number is?
Yes, ma'am, that is the random match probability on the items in which Angel Gonzalez was not excluded as a donor. And that number would be identified as 16 nonillion.
Again, just
Very
big
discriminating.
numbers. So when you say somebody is not excluded with the technology that we have now to do this amazing testing of things, you feel very comfortable saying that that person cannot be excluded as a contributor, right?
That's correct. We go with each individual genetic marker, and if the person matches that genetic marker, then they may have been the contributor. Then we go to marker 2, marker 3, and we go through a gamut of 21 different genetic markers. And when that person cannot be excluded as a donor, then that's the final conclusion. This person is not excluded. And then as to the match estimate, that's the strength of that match, those very large or discriminating numbers.
And then with regard to somebody being excluded, that means that that person is excluded as a contributor to the sample, right?
Yes, the DNA profile from that person could not have produced the genetic profile in which we are examining. So they are excluded as a donor.
Okay, and those results are just as important sometimes as saying somebody cannot be excluded, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Depending on the cases we're dealing with.
The circumstances, yes,
Sure.
ma'am.
So, and then we have another one here that says inconclusive. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand inconclusive from your perspective to be that you just can't come up with an answer that is forensically that you would feel comfortable saying is forensically certain, I guess, or maybe just explain it. You can probably do it better than me.
You mentioned earlier, there are 3 conclusions you can make when you're actually comparing a known reference standard to the unknown. The person is not excluded as a donor, and then we provide that match estimate. The person is excluded, or that third one is it's inconclusive. So that means that I've taken this known standard and compared it against the forensic unknown specimen. And for a variety of reasons, the complexity of the profile, the number of contributors, an insufficient amount of genetic material, highly degraded DNA. There are various reasons why that comparison just can't be made. And therefore, it's inconclusive to this, for example, the component of that DNA.
Okay, and in this case, you had the gamut of all 3 findings in your results, right?
That is correct.
And so I'm just going to ask you to verify with your report that I've got it right here in the chart that I prepared for myself to kind of wrap my mind around everything. So we're looking at item E1. You said that you looked at both the handle of the knife and the blade of the knife, correct?
That is correct.
And according to your results, from what I understood, you found that Isaac Aguilar could not be excluded as a genetic contributor to the handle of that knife, correct?
That is correct.
And Angel Gonzales, you could not say that he was not excluded or excluded. It was inconclusive with regard to whether or not he could have been a genetic contributor to the handle of that knife, correct?
That is correct.
And then let's look at the blade. The blade of the knife, Isaac Aguilar was not excluded as a genetic contributor to the blade of the knife.
That is correct.
Additionally, Angel Gonzalez was not excluded as a contributor to the blade of the knife, right?
Yes, ma'am, that is also correct.
All right, moving on. We have E1. That was a swab of apparent blood from the knife. Now, you did not collect that swab, right?
That is correct. The swab was just labeled E1A swab of knife.
And from a forensic standpoint, you don't have a way to know where on the knife that swab came from or not, do you?
No, ma'am, I do not.
And I'm gonna maybe guess, but you can tell me, is that why you did a separate swab from the handle and the blade of the knife when you took swabs?
No, typically when we receive knives or weapons, we will always swab, for example, where we identify potential blood, as an example, on a handle, as well as the knife, as well as the blade. So I didn't perform those analysis on the knife, blade, and handle because of E1A, meaning I didn't know from where it was collected. I would have done it anyway.
Okay.
But yes, by me performing that analysis, at least I could state from where it was collected.
Okay. And would you agree with me though, that if I wanted to take if I wanted to take a sample from a knife or from a gun or anything, that the better practice, rather than swabbing the whole thing and having one swab, might be to take a swab from the handle, a swab from the barrel of the gun, a swab from the trigger, instead of just rubbing my swab all over again, for example.
I wouldn't call it a better practice, but I can at least state from where I collected it if I have done so myself.
Would you say that that would be important if knowing who touched what where was an issue?
I'm not sure if that would say that. And for example, in this case, there was the reddish brownish soiling over the kind of the entire knife. So as to who touched where or where the potential blood or alleged blood may have moved around on the knife, I don't know. Again, all I can say is that breaking on the 4-inch of the handle area and then the few inches of the blade, I was able to take a swab on each side.
Okay.
So again, as to who touched or not touched, I wouldn't feel comfortable other than stating who's the donor of the DNA from which I identified.
And to be clear, I'm not asking you to guess at who, in this case or any other case, like who touched what, but I'm just saying, as far as who contributed to what part of an item, this is where essentially the rubber hits the road. We know who's a genetic contributor and who's excluded and who's not excluded, right? On any item, not just this.
That is correct.
Okay. And if we're looking at the black t-shirt, that was one that you took 2 cuttings from. And again, you said you took them from different spots on the shirt. And I put 2 check marks here and 2 X's. So to be clear, your finding was that Isaac was not excluded as a contributor of genetic material in both samples, but Angel was excluded, correct?
Yes, that single source profile identified on the front and the back of the shirt was consistent with originating from Isaac Aguilar.
And then as far as the E3, that was another swab that was collected, I believe you said from the backyard was the designation. And that was, Isaac was not excluded as a contributor, but Angel was excluded as a contributor, right?
That is correct.
And then we have E4, which was the fan swab. And that one as well, Isaac was a contributor, Angel not a contributor, right?
Yes, there's one caveat to that is there was a major component of DNA that was identified. And from that, that is correct. Isaac Aguilar is not excluded as that resolved major component in which Angel Gonzales was excluded. And this was one of those samples where there was additional genetic material, but not near enough to lend itself to a forensic DNA comparison. So the report would say additional genetic material, which could not be attributed to, and in this case, that would be Isaac Aguilar was identified on that item. However, forensic DNA comparison could not be done.
So potentially, does that mean that there could have been DNA from somebody who is neither Isaac nor Angel on that?
Potentially, that is possible.
Okay, and that's not uncommon where there's multiple people around, right?
No, that's not uncommon at all.
Okay, and then we've got E5, that was the swab from the driveway, and on this one, we have the flip side. We've got Isaac was excluded as a contributor, and Angel could not be excluded as a contributor, correct?
Correct. Could you do me a favor and just go down a teeny bit? So since I didn't create this, I want to double check.
Sure.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
On those two items in which you mentioned, E5 driveway, E6 sidewalk, excuse me, it was a single source contributor consistent with originating from Angel Gonzales. So therefore, Isaac Aguilar was excluded as a donor.
Okay, so just to recap and make sure that we understand your results. With regard to the knife, we've got Isaac is not excluded on the handle, Angel is inconclusive.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
And on the blade, both of their genetic material cannot be excluded as contributing to the sample from the blade.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
All right. I'm going to pass the witness and thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
State,
Briefly, Judge.
yes.
Mr. Foster, what is touch DNA?
The term touch DNA has originated due to the sensitivity of our technique. So for example, if I was to have my hand and place it on something, the potential is that cellular material, not necessarily biological fluids like blood, semen, saliva, but a very low quantity of DNA theoretically could be transferred. So that would be called touch just because it's from the hand coming over. The DNA itself is identical to the blood, the semen, the saliva, but it's that very low level quantity DNA that is been termed touch.
So there's potential to leave touch DNA, but it's not certain that every time you touch something, DNA will be left behind, correct?
That is correct.
So for example, if I were to touch this table here, would you be able to find touch DNA from that?
Again, there is no touch DNA, it would just be DNA. And the only thing I could do is, for example, if an individual was to swap that, and then I was to examine it in the laboratory to determine, is there a profile? If there was not, then I would state that no human DNA was identified on that. If there was, then obviously I would attempt to make the comparison.
Sure, and forgive my layman's terminology of touch DNA, which is how I'm thinking of it in my mind. So forgive me, thank you for correcting me. So regarding the knife handle, you have no idea what kind of DNA was left behind on that knife handle, aside from the fact that you did test in the serology analysis and you found it there to be blood on the knife. Is that correct?
That is correct. So specifically, if you're asking the source of the DNA, could this be blood? Could this be something else? The answer is yes. It could have been the alleged or suspected blood stain, since it's only a presumptive test. But if it was mixed with, as an example, saliva or something else, my DNA analysis and testing would not show that.
Pass the witness.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Subject to recall,
All right,
but
all right, you may step down.
that's how it goes.
Just
Sure.
make sure that you're available if either party wishes to recall you.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may step down. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna start tomorrow. The equipment has been fixed, crossing our fingers. So we've been told. We're gonna start tomorrow at 9:30. Remember my instructions. You are not allowed to start deliberating internally. You're not to start deliberating with each other. You're not allowed to discuss this case at all. If you see anything, you are to ignore it. If somebody wants to talk to you about it, you are to completely ignore it. Does everyone understand?
Yes.
Everything that you know about this case is to come from inside the courtroom, okay?
Yes.
Now, we're starting tomorrow at 9:30. On Fridays, unless a judge has specifically ordered for a panel to be brought in, there are no extra jurors coming in. So you can come probably at 9 and you'll have a parking spot because we don't have the major number of juries, all right? All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors.